Where were you, and how do you remember when you were notified that your dad had died?
I had a friend who met me outside of a yoga class on New Year's Eve in New York City, and he told me my dad had died. And my initial reaction was, my dad can't die. And at that moment, visually, the whole world changed for me. And I realized that what I was living before had been a dream, and then now I was in hyper-reality. When I went to the funeral, I'd never been to a funeral before, if you can imagine that. I was 30 years old and I'd never been to a funeral. There was something wonderful about somebody dying who's close to you in the sense that it purifies you. Suddenly, I became very honest and wanted to look at everything, and I really wanted to find out who my dad was. Who was this man? You know, who was this man who was my father but was also this legend? Thus, I started undertaking the writing of the book. He had asked me to help him write his autobiography a few years before he died, and I said I couldn't be his ghostwriter. Well, as soon as he died, I was like, okay, Dad.
Jennifer Allen began working in her late father's office, researching the career of a man for whom the circle of life meant only football. Jennifer hoped in writing the book she could feel closer to her father, even though he was gone.
My mom and I went to the ladies' room before the service was about to begin. We were looking in the mirror, and one of us said, I feel like I'm going to a Redskin game. And the other one said, so do I. It was that same sense of purpose and urgency, and that what you were about to do is life and death. And that's when I really realized that really we believed everything that he said, and we lived the life as he said it, which was that winning is living and losing is dying.
I once wrote on the blackboard that a loser is dead and doesn't know it.
And that a funeral could feel as intense as a football game. It's pretty incredible. It's a lot of emotion.
Jennifer once found a note her father had written in the margin of a playbook. It read, "In my heart, this is my life." It was a life George Allen lived and loved to the fullest. George Allen rose to prominence as defensive coordinator in Chicago. Working under George Halas, Allen pioneered the blitz and zone coverage. When the Bears intercepted 5 passes to win the 1963 championship, it was Allen, not Halas, who was carried off the field by the players.
It really didn't strike me until afterwards because it was so unbelievable. My father got the game ball. But I did hear him, in the locker room singing, "Hooray for George, hooray at last."
Hooray for George, he's a horse's ass. But, the defense, we kind of dominated that team. We just got in the locker room, grabbed the game ball and said, hey, we're going to give it to George.
I was almost 3. I don't remember the game. My mom said I was taking a nap during the game. But what I remember is my dad coming home really late at night and hearing them holler downstairs and coming downstairs and seeing all my brothers circled around him, and they were tossing the game ball up in the air that he had won. And that was my earliest memory. And my father really saw that game as the beginning of his career.
In 1966, Allen was hired as head coach of the Rams and quickly got the players' attention.
I went up to talk with him about contracts. I had a piece of roast beef, and he had his little vegetables and stuff, and I started to take a bite of the roast beef, and he says, that roast beef is a loser. I said, Coach, I don't know what you mean. He said, all the winners are out there alive. They're walking around eating hay and giving milk. I said, that roast beef is a loser. I said, oh, okay.
Everybody alert now.
We actually had 3-a-day practices for a couple of weeks. All practices were 3.5 hours long. He wanted our will. He was going to give us an example of if you wanted to have victory, this is how it had to be done.
He loved training camp. He said that it was his favorite time of year because everything was structured and disciplined.
That's the pass I was referring to there, you see. Now, Jack, if he runs his shooting up, you're going to take him.
He'd have a couple of whistles, some chalk, jar of peanut butter, vitamins, and he was ready to go.
Here we go, let's go.
Training camp was fun for Allen, but for his players, it was something else altogether.
It was a bitch. And I know that might not sound good on this station, but like I said, ain't no other way to describe it, because he was.
Let's do it again. Same thing again.
See, we needed to learn how to practice hard. We were losers when he took over. We had the theory that, you draft to win, to make a championship. George brought in take the veteran, cultivate him, and you can get to that point a lot quicker. He said the future is now. Win the day. Put all the eggs on the line today.
Allen's defensive system allowed Deacon Jones, number 75, and Merlin Olsen, number 74, to flourish into All-Pros. The line soon had a nickname, the Fearsome Foursome, and the Rams were on their way to their first winning season in 7 years.
You talk about George Allen, there's only one thing that counts, winning, nothing else. Everybody has that little deal where God, family, football. George would tell you today, football, family, and God.
Since July the 6th, I've probably eaten 8 or 9 meals at home with my family. And they know how I am, and I appreciate the fact that she doesn't interfere. She knows that during the football season, she isn't going to see very much of me. We try to make up for it during the off season, but we haven't been doing a very good job there either.
One time we were in the Bahamas, and he saw some natives who were unusually fit, and he had brought a football along, which we didn't know until he produced it, and a stopwatch, and was timing them. One guy he brought back and had him try out for the team.
What was it like around the house to live with a coach who was that competitive and that focused on one thing?
Well, it really was living as if you were constantly in the fifth quarter, the sudden death, overtime. He was so focused that you often felt that even though he was there, he wasn't there. You know, you felt that his mind was somewhere else, almost absent-minded professor.
So he picked up his soup and his crackers and his chocolate chip cookie, and we sat down, and George started talking football while we were having lunch. And absently, while eating his soup, he broke up the chocolate chip cookie into the soup instead of the crackers because his mind was miles away.
He would go to the stadium 4 or 5 hours before the game. We were driving up the Harbor Freeway in Los Angeles. I don't even think I was 12 yet. He said, Bruce, grab the wheel. And I said, okay, and I barely could see over the dashboard. I'm grabbing the wheel, and he's got his foot on the accelerator, and he just wanted to make sure the audibles were the proper ones for the game and that he had them in his mind. And I'm driving like this, going about 75 miles an hour up the Harbor Freeway.
Allen was, indeed, a driven man. And in only his second season in Los Angeles, he won over the players by leading the Rams to the playoffs.
I think that George had a feeling for the player right through his soul, right to his heart. He knew that the people that were going to win football games were his players. As a result, he battled for you to have the most comfortable facilities that you possibly could. He battled to get us a Universal machine and an Olympic set, a sauna bath. You started staying in nice hotels. You started flying charter flights. And he also went to bat for you as long as you gave him loyalty. He would go to bat for you in trying to help you make more money with your contract.
And he became identified as a player coach. Okay? Which benefited us, but it alienated management. Therefore, eventually you will be fired.
You have to understand what the Reeves regime was like. Dan Reeves was really a gentleman born on Fifth Avenue. A nice guy, except when he drank. Reeves liked to gather with his cronies at night and employees, some of them who worked for the Rams, and drink.
George was an apple juice, orange juice kind of guy who could care less about a party, who could care less about the celebration of victory, who cared only about victory.
After his third consecutive winning season, Allen was fired by Dan Reeves. But when the players rallied behind the coach, Reeves backed down and Allen stayed.
It wasn't a hard decision to make. I mean, look where we'd come from and where we were. I think we all felt like that we owed something to this man, George Allen, because of what he gave to us.
The Rams continued to have success on the field, but Allen's relationship with management never improved. After winning 2 division titles and 72% of his games in 5 seasons with the Rams, Allen was fired for good in 1970.
Today starts a new era as far as the Washington Redskins are concerned. All right.
Embittered by his firing in Los Angeles, George Allen was even more obsessed with winning when he took over the Redskins. He defied conventional wisdom by trading away his draft choices for battle-scarred veterans,
Nice. Oh, all right, okay.
many of whom had played for him with the Rams. The age of the team forced Allen to conduct shorter, less physical practices, but it also gave him the best chance to win immediately.
If we get all the guys, the new guys, there's only about 3 Redskins left.
He loved to get an older player, and the first thing he would say was, your other team gave up on you. They think you're too old.
Pettibone isn't bad.
Not bad for an old geezer,
No, not bad at all.
I'd like to get a few more older guys like that, you see.
A little older.
Yeah.
I think they're too young now, There's a lot to learn.
Party's only 35.
Allen's Redskins were nicknamed the Over-the-Hill Gang, but they played with a passion of men reborn. A franchise that had just one winning season in 15 years was transformed overnight into a Super Bowl contender.
George treated these old coots better than any coach certainly had ever treated them in their lives, because they didn't have tough practices. There was no contact. It was all very civilized.
That's it. Good.
For him, the game of football was almost an intellectual exercise and a psychological exercise as opposed to a physical exercise.
So all it is for you is this type of thing, see?
To George, it was a game of chess.
But get up, feel a little bit, see?
Position here, position there, make sure the wind is blowing in the right direction. Every little detail he covered, probably to a boring extent.
Defense, come on, back in the huddle. Is that the way you break the huddle? You're going to be a great defense and you break the huddle that way? Holy crap.
But make no mistake, they knew what to do once they hit that football field.
Allen created the nickel defense and was the first to employ situation substitutions. With his veteran players, Allen had old dogs who could learn his new tricks. And at home, he had another old dog with a similar pedigree.
Hilda was our first dog, and Dad brought her home and surprised us. She'd already been through 3 homes.
I think it was generally a dog that no one else wanted, but my father seemed to like.
She couldn't be controlled. You would tie her even sometimes with several leashes and tie her to something, and you would drive away, and about a mile down the road you'd see her in the rearview mirror. She'd be running after it.
Hilda would just do whatever it wanted, would go through a screen. It was a very independent old veteran dog.
Marine Land used to be down the street, and we get calls, your dog's in the SEAL tank.
Somehow that dog relaxed my father.
My dad loved Hilda. He loved her so much. He said that she had a lot of character. One of the reasons why he liked her is because she had been traded, and she was sort of this cast-off, like the players that he liked.
The old pro! Boy, that's the old pro.
Dogged determination also describes Bill Malinchak, who left the Redskins for a job on Wall Street, only to have Allen lure him back for a Dallas game in 1976.
And George calls this guy and says, Bill, I really need you to come and play this game against the Cowboys. And, Malinchak being a believer, well, yeah, coach, I'll be there, George puts him in and he blocks a punt. Now, how did George Allen know that?
I think that was the genius in him, and in his game plans and everything.
It was something George, in one of those endless nights with game films, had seen a chink in the Cowboys' armor. And he said, well, there's one guy in the world who can take advantage of it. I don't care if he's a stockbroker.
He believed he could outwork his opponent. I will know you better than you know yourself.
It certainly is the madness of King George. And it also says something about, it's a two-way thing. George reaches out to this guy who's wearing a 3-piece suit every day. And Bill Malinchak doesn't laugh at him. Bill Malinchak says, yes, sir, coach, I'll be there.
Knowing that George Allen had faith in me to come back and maybe make 1 or 2 big plays for him, I couldn't refuse him.
Now, everybody has certainly has ways of describing your father as a head coach, devoted, the incredible work ethic, detail-oriented. How would you describe George Allen as a father?
I think he was similar as a father as he was a coach. I've seen clips where he would come up to a guy and say, Jim, you don't like to fumble, do you? We don't like fumblers.
You've never had any problem fumbling, have you?
Yes, sir.
No, that's one of the things I really can't stand in the back,
That's how my dad was as a father. He wouldn't overstate, he wouldn't nag, but he would take you aside and he would say, I'm a little concerned about where you might be headed with your schoolwork.
He was a humanist. You know, he taught you to know about yourself and how to get the most out of yourself.
Don't worry about that, Mike. He usually likes in moves there. He ran a corner, so it was a perfect pass. Don't worry about it. Okay.
With George Allen, you were the most important. You were the most important. And he taught you how to find ways inside of yourself to commit yourself to the group effort.
We all got something to prove.
That's important too.
Damn, and we keep selling that. The hell out there, we can beat anybody.
His era as a coach was the era of the guys with the stone jaws. Chuck Noll. Don Shula was the embodiment of a football coach. Madden. I mean, big guys with gnarled fingers were descended from coal miners. And George he was hunched over and he had this kind of bird-like way of moving. And he would clap his hands like this.
George was almost sometimes seemed like a 19th century person. He was so earnest and so evangelical.
We gotta get going. Come on, let's go.
Kind of almost like a Pentecostal minister.
Come on, let's get going.
He tried to convince everyone that it's what's in your mind. You can make yourself win. He had made himself win. He had made teams win. He could make you win if you believed in his way all the way.
I think George Allen was a great fan. I think he was as close to being a jock sniffer as a great coach can be. He had Sonny Jurgensen. He had Charlie Taylor, Pat Fisher, and Dyron Talbert. He really worshipped these guys. When they did that silly cheer, hooray for George. I think that was the highlight of George Allen's day.
He really loved all of his players. That's one thing that I had to learn from the very beginning, that that was his extended family.
My father really spent so much time with men. So much time with men. He worked 7 days a week, that when he came home and he saw his daughter, he didn't really know how to talk with me differently. He didn't treat me like one of the boys, but he didn't talk football to me. They had their own language going on. My brothers and my dad had their own, the sub-languages you find in playbooks. Tab, statue, right, that's a play. I would hear that, I wouldn't know what that meant.
To be able to hang around football players from age 7 on, it's a dream. It's living in Fantasy Island, because we got to do everything. We'd be in the locker room, we'd see the players. Jen was excluded from that, and I'm sure that was tough on her.
I really yearned to be closer to him and to be one of the boys. I wanted them to talk football with me, and I thought I would grow up to be the first female quarterback in the NFL.
She had it tough. It was tough growing up in that house, constantly being left out, being made to feel like the fifth wheel. Her father was not there very often. Family vacations were spent scouting all-star games in Buffalo. It was all football, all the time, 24/7.
To him, the world was a distraction. Kissinger was doing something important in the world, and his players were thinking about it. They weren't spending those 5 minutes thinking about football.
Another thing, if guys will talk football off the field and on the bus and on the plane, rather than just making a lot of nonsense and telling dirty jokes and things like that, but you'll find out that a group of winners will do that.
All this was a technique to win. Everything he did, he thought about only winning.
We had to gather Friday before our meeting for ice cream.
The ice cream and cake was right down his alley. That was part of his program. He made everybody feel as one unit and one team.
Like on our ring here, it says togetherness. He knew you could win with players playing together.
I want you to get everyone to feel that way.
He was a psychologist.
Been through the losing years, and now we want to win.
In our exhibition season, we won our first game in Denver, I think it was, and when we all got together and he said 3 cheers for the Redskins.
Let's have 3 cheers for the Redskins. Hip, hip.
I said 3 cheers for, and everybody's clapping, this is an exhibition game. I'd been in the NFL 10 years. I'd never seen anybody as enthusiastic and had the real corny cliches that he had.
Just remember this, 40 men together can't lose, okay?
But I also saw the organization and I saw things around me that were happening that I'd never seen before. You get caught up in that enthusiasm, you get caught up in the whole atmosphere, and it breeds winning.
In athletics, I think as long as you can win, the guys will do anything. The guys would play along. It was a joke, and we knew it was a joke, but it was fun.
George! God dang, it's great to be a Redskin! One of the greatest motivators of all time. It's like I got a doctor of philosophy and motivation with George Allen.
And keep coming on every play and we'll win.
The master motivator drew his inspiration from wife Etty, a native of Tunisia who never saw a football game until she met Allen at Morningside College, where he was then a first-year coach.
I didn't realize your mom cursed as much as she did.
She did swear, and it fired him up. It fired him up. Before the game, she would say, I want 3 interceptions, 2 fumbles, and 1 cripple. And he would, okay, sweetie. And it's very,
He would have been disappointed if I hadn't said, beat those goddamn Cowboys.
The Cowboys were the reigning world champions until they came to Washington on New Year's Eve, 1972. The Redskins demolished Dallas and earned their first trip to the Super Bowl.
Calling his signals, Billy facing a 5-man front for Dallas as Kilmer drops straight back. Being rushed, throws his pass to Taylor. Touchdown, Washington! Billy Kilmer, perfectly on target, throwing to his...
George Allen, the hard-working, milk-drinking son of a Detroit auto worker, was the first head coach in NFL history to serve more than 10 seasons and never have a losing record. And this victory was his crowning moment. Redskin Park was the first practice facility of its kind, built in a secluded area near Dulles Airport. George Allen saw to every detail in his Magic Kingdom, even labeling the trees around the field.
It was like Disneyland for a nutty football coach. It was a bizarre place, a fence all around it, 8-foot-high fence.
He was paranoid to the point of, there were times you thought he was almost psychotic. We used to call him Nixon with a whistle.
They were very similar people. I think there was genuine connection between them. They were both very determined, very hardworking, true believers. I think they kind of saw quasi-mirror images of themselves in the other person.
Nixon used to always send him plays, and we played San Francisco in a playoff game, and we doing a great job in the first half. And he sent in a reverse. That was Nixon's play. It lost 35 yards, and we wound up losing the game.
Nixon often invited my dad to White House dinners, and my dad often declined because they were during the season. And
so he would get an invitation to go to a White House dinner, and he would decline?
President Nixon offered to host a dinner in honor of my father, and he declined.
And he would say, what do they think? This is Wednesday, it's the most important day of the week. We have meetings, we have practice.
It would be an awful reflection. He thought his players would go, look at him goofing off.
Nixon and Allen also shared a deep distrust of the Washington press.
I think he felt that a reporter's job of a home team paper should be to support that team.
The idea that the press may have other objectives, another point of view, this was completely alien to him. It just didn't penetrate. It was like, no, why aren't you guys with the program? The program is winning. You guys should be helping us win.
So when you write about who should be quarterback, you're hurting the fans in Washington, you're hurting the football team.
We were all just a bunch of raggedy-ass communists out there trying to make trouble for him.
On the press, there's nothing to be gained by answering a question that you feel is controversial. Just say, no comment.
You just felt that you were dealing with someone, almost I want to say someone from another planet. He was so obviously possessed by this demon, so driven.
How about every damn guy in here now? Everybody listen to this. We got 30 minutes to live.
It was very frustrating, but somehow it was hard to get mad at someone who clearly had sacrificed his whole life to this. I mean, he was so determined to cut essentials out of his life, to cut the corners off of bread, to cut chewing out, to cut everything out.
Eating and sleeping was an imposition. Sleeping, he would say, is your leisure time, and you can do it in about 5 hours. That was his leisure, sleeping. And he didn't like to eat. He liked peanut butter, he liked milk, and he liked ice cream. And that was about it.
He had ulcers, and the milk smoothed out his ulcers. Eating ice cream and drinking milk was so easy that he didn't have to think about it. It just dissolved. The ice cream would just dissolve, and the milk would make the ulcer feel better. If you ever told him to make one of those tacos that you make yourself, no way. He'd just forget it. He'll just give me another glass of milk.
Listen, this This is the opportunity we all been waiting for. This is what it's all about.
I was working at a gas station as a teenager, and Dad came to visit me at the gas station, and there was some trash on the ground at the gas station, and he said, "Why aren't you picking that up?" And I said, "What? It's Burger King wrappers that's flying over from the store across." And he says, "Pick it up. You want to have the cleanest gas station of anybody in McLean, Virginia."
This is all part of winning, even if it's a service station. First thing when I drive up to a service station, I want that guy to run out and take care of my car, you know. If he comes walking out like this, I think right away that guy's second division, you know.
I think the unique thing with George is the focus carried over 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Been so much talk about the playoffs for Christmas. Well, so what? You got a lot of Christmases. You got Christmases all your life. You know, the only thing that's important is go there and be proud of yourself and play good football and get on that plane and win.
I still think it was strange to live your life that way, but I kind of feel more empathy for him as a driven person, as a person who couldn't help himself, you know, who just seemed to have to be this way. You know, I more and more see this as not a choice.
He would be in his yard, and if there was a weed in that yard, he'd say to the person next to him, he says, "All right." He says, "See that weed there?
If I pull this weed out in one piece, we're going to beat Dallas on Sunday.
If I get that weed on that shot, Staubach's out of the game." That was obsession, because he was serious when he was doing those things.
He comes in the meeting room with a kimono on, and he's got these two Koreans with boards holding. They come in, he marches in like, you know, like the karate guys were, and he says, "I always said I'd fight Tom Landry at the 50-yard line. Well, look, this is what I do." So he gets up and he kicks one board and he cracks the board. Whole room's just gone crazy. You know, and they yell, "Go George, go George," yeah, and everybody's yelling and screaming.
It's like your grandfather, you know. Actually, you know, he's a little bit older and does a few odd things, but they're humorous. And he did them all in the sense of passion.
He did make a comment. He said, "If we could win the Super Bowl, I'd cut my son's right arm off." Well, he wouldn't do that. He said, "I don't think so."
Could you describe what it was like to be around George after a loss?
Oh, it was dark. It was quiet.
As close to death as you can imagine. It was bad.
There could be 8 people in the car and not one person was talking. And he would have the little reading light on, reading over the play-by-play. So you would have to go through each agonizing mistake of the game.
When I was coaching, if we lost a game, I went home and ate rice pudding and raisins. I wouldn't accept a dinner at the White House. I was ashamed of myself because we lost.
You know, his saying, "When you lose, you die a little." As a little girl, I really took that literally, and I was very concerned and worried about my dad when we lost.
After a losing game, he really looked, you know, kind of like death warmed over it. I mean, to him, this was reality. And I think it was always frustrating to him that reporters, players, no one could get this intense about it as he could.
If you don't understand that, George, you better take a course. Christ almighty.
And he just kind of felt, well, why don't you guys get it? It is this bad. It really is this bad. Don't you know this? Don't you see this?
You have to fear losing so much that it encompasses you, your team, your whole organization. You know what I thought? Damn it, it's a hell of a thing for either one of us to lose. Because
In his only Super Bowl appearance, Allen met Don Shula's Miami Dolphins, who were on their way to the first unbeaten and untied season in NFL history. Over the next 5 years, the Redskins would make the playoffs twice, only to lose in the first round. The Over-the-Hill gang was running out of time, and the fans and management were running out of patience.
Oh, you Allen, you horse ass! You big goddamn egotist!
His one failing was that he made the game not be fun for the owner. Edward Bennett Williams didn't enjoy owning a football team coached by George Allen.
Edward Bennett Williams made a statement at a welcome home luncheon where you had 2,500 people that he hired George Allen and gave him unlimited expense account, and he exceeded it in his first year. And then George Allen got right up and just stared at him. I was there. He looked right at Edward Bennett Williams and said, "Do you want a winner? If you want a winner, that's what you hired me for. Don't be counting the money."
Someone who is monomaniacal, You can't reason with them, you can't talk with them, you can't kid around with them. All they're thinking of is, I gotta have this because I need this to win, and don't you understand how important this is? His demands were probably too much for the owners of the team. They finally said, look, I don't want to put up with this unless he's winning the Super Bowl every year. If he's not winning the Super Bowl every year, I don't want to deal with this.
After the 1977 season, the Redskins fired George Allen. He was rehired by the Rams, but fired after just 2 preseason games.
Since I've been covering sports, that might have been the most ridiculous firing I've ever seen. 2 exhibition games, the late Carroll Rosenblum, for reasons that defy all sane calculations, listened to people who were backstabbing George in the Ram organization. It put a black mark on George Allen's name, and it scared off all the other owners.
They thought he was a control freak and all of that. He was a winning freak. Everything he did, he wanted to win. He wasn't going to go to a job that somebody else is going to make the trades and somebody else is going to draft the players or tell them who to start.
He was a guy that had to look into the league and see guys coaching that he knew he was better than, but he never got a call. And I think that goes back to alienating owners, and one owner would talk to the other owner and don't hire this guy because you can't control him and this, that, and the other. He was, I think he was blackballed.
What was it like when George was out of coaching? I mean, that's almost like, it's like a man without a country.
I think his first season not coaching in 1978 was really probably the most difficult year of his life. He really felt that not letting him coach football was like taking an instrument away from a musician.
He was very depressed, but he always felt he was going to come back. He was going to come back and coach. I mean, he never thought that would be the end of his career.
One time he came back from a trip and he said, they all call me Mr. Allen. And to Dad, that was an insult. Because the greatest title you could give him is coach.
It took him a long time to get some footing as to what do I do with the remaining days of my life. That was some of the notes I found that he'd written to himself. And he started planting fruit trees. And he didn't want any rookie trees, so he would plant trees that were 2 years old because he knew they would bear fruit sooner.
And George was running 6 miles a day and doing 120 sit-ups, lifting weights. I mean, he was trained to kill.
We beat those Cowboys in their own backyard. Redskins 27, Cowboys 14. Made the playoffs, you see.
And you knew he was watching game films. But I just think he was desperate. I really do. I don't know if that sounds sad or pathetic. I'm not sure those are the right adjectives. But certainly he was dying. It was not about losing a game, it was about potentially losing his career.
In the 80s, George Allen coached 2 seasons in the USFL and headed the President's Council on Fitness. But in 1990, he took on perhaps his greatest challenge, head coach at Long Beach State.
Bruce called me up and told me that it was happening, and I thought he was joking. I really did. I couldn't believe. I didn't take him seriously. I said, "You gotta be kidding me." He says, "Why is he doing this?" And he said, "Well, my daddy wants to coach."
They had 8 footballs when he arrived there, 8 footballs total. The practice field was a putting green for the university. Not one defensive end had ever played in a college game. The quarterback had never thrown a pass. The punter had never punted.
Probably was his hardest task ever. You can't trade in college. You have very arcane, Byzantine, restricted regulations as far as the NCAA is concerned.
He loved that. He loved that it was this team that was just falling apart, and he didn't want to cut one player because he didn't want anyone to go away feeling defeated. They weren't going to be pros, but he knew that maybe what he would teach them on the field they could take with them in their life.
We didn't do this in the NFL. I think this is a plus for us.
I got to spend a lot of time with his last year coaching at Long Beach, and that was really rewarding. He saw himself as a teacher, a mentor, kind of a father to them.
He was sincere about the university. He was very sincere about those kids. He wanted the best for those kids. He fought for those kids. And when they saw that, they knew they had the right guy. And he was the right guy.
We loved him. We accepted him. He already won us over. We just was looking to him to show us the way because we wanted to become winners.
And now George Allen's 49ers of Long Beach State take to the field here at Clemson's Death Valley.
In his first game, Allen's young team had no chance against nationally ranked Clemson. But the coach delivered a powerful message in the post-game locker room.
You can't accept losing. You can't accept losing. We didn't realize we were accepting losing until he said that. We was like, wow, no wonder why this guy is such a special coach in winning, because he takes it to heart. He takes it personal.
Allen took a personal interest in Mark Say, who was the innocent victim of a shooting the previous year and was attempting a comeback despite the loss of a kidney.
And he said, I admire you. I admire your courage. And he said that if he got to go to the President of the United States to get me back on the football field, he said that's what he's going to do.
Allen gave Say a chance to play when most colleges would have said no. Say led the team in receptions and graduated to a career in the NFL.
Throws wide open to Say. He caught it. Touchdown.
But Allen did more than save just Mark Say's career. He breathed life into a college program most people considered hopeless. Allen rallied Long Beach from an 0-3 start in 1990 to finish the season 6-5.
Somehow, he did the same thing in the college that he did in the pro. He was able to motivate his troops.
Everybody stick together and hit hard. Yeah!
To me, I think it was George Allen's greatest coaching accomplishment, going 6-5 with a team that, believe me, wasn't that good.
He had to coach. He had to coach to live. I really think it's that simple.
Keep inside position all the way.
That was what he took his identity from. That was his life. You know, you weren't letting this guy breathe if you weren't letting him coach.
I think he was doing what he knew how to do as well as he knew how to do it. It was sort of like he was doing God's work.
Football was his religion. Football was where he felt like he was making a difference in life. And you know what? He did. He made a difference in my life. And as I continue to live on, I realized the impact that he made on my life. It's like a part of him is growing inside of me. And I believe George Allen is living through a whole lot of people because he was a football coach.
On December 31st, 1990, just 1 month after completing the Long Beach season, George Allen died. He suffered a heart attack at home while watching a bowl game on TV. He was 72 years old.
I realized when he went to Long Beach, I finally understood him. The level of competition is not what matters. It's the competition itself that matters. And he said it was the most satisfying season of all his coaching career. And you know, from guys with earrings and ponytails and people who had never worn clean clothes going to school, they all came to his memorial service in buses, looking like well-dressed gentlemen.
My brothers decided what he would wear, and he wore his navy blue blazer and his red and blue striped tie and his khaki coaching pants. When I saw him wearing what he liked to wear on his way to the game, I realized that was exactly right, that he would be buried with that, and they put a game ball with him.
I wanted to organize it for all the people who knew him as a coach and a teacher. And so it would have been something he would have been proud of. It was going to be George giving a speech to everybody without George.
He wanted you to be a winner in life and continue to win for the rest of your lives.
They all spoke, it was all men, and later I said to my brother Bruce, I said, well, why didn't you let me speak? And he said, well, we were honoring a coach, not a father that day. And I realized that had I spoken, maybe I wouldn't have written the book. Maybe I wouldn't have felt as compelled to sort of go back and look through all his things and find out who was this man.
What do you think George Allen's heaven would be?
It would involve players like Bill Kilmer and Roman Gabriel and Deacon Jones. It would involve his family. It would involve winning, but it would also involve losing because he loved the challenge.
It's not a football field with him. It's having a plan, having a direction. If he's just sitting around on a lounge chair in heaven, he is not having that much fun.
As we all know, where George is today, he has it organized. And George, save a spot for me. I want to be on that team.
One of the greatest things that could ever be bestowed on me when they asked me to be a pallbearer at the old man's funeral, and accepted me as one of the family.
Deacon Jones believes George Allen is responsible for the success he enjoyed, on and off the field.
I would have never made it in pro football if I'd have been judged on the fundamentals of my game. Because I came from a black college situation, from segregation, never having played against a white guy until I came into the pros. I was the most frustrated individual you ever met in your life during that period. Because I was dealing with tokenism, I was dealing with quotas. I hated white people for a long time. It wasn't an even playing field. 3 years after I came into the pros, I met George Allen. He brought about the only even playing field I ever had. I ended up having a coach who I give 100% credit for developing my career. I married a white lady. You understand? All the things that I was really upset about, my life just switched like that.
It has been said that the man who produces an idea in any field of endeavor, the man who discovers new knowledge, is the permanent benefactor of humanity. The man who discovers my knowledge and ability, who channeled it, refined it, and without whose guidance I would not be here today, Coach George Allen. Thank you very much, Coach.
George Allen helped Deacon Jones find his way in life, as he did with his own family.
You look at a man and his value in life, you look at his children and see what happens to them. And his family carry on the tradition. He motivated his family as well as he motivated all of his football teams.
George, with where he's gone with his life, being governor of Virginia, now being a senator, who knows, he might be the president one day. The perseverance and persistence, I think that comes from his father. Bruce, the general managership, being a football-related guy, being able to make moves much like his dad did, that comes from his dad. Greg, the soft side of his father, the side that hardly anybody saw, and I think that's why Greg is able to deal with people at being a sports psychologist. Jennifer might be the most like her dad. Perhaps if she hadn't been such an attractive young lady, she would have been a hell of a football player.
Now, you named your kids after Roman and Deacon, right?
We did. We named our firstborn Roman after Roman Gabriel because Roman Gabriel was actually my first crush in life. And then Deacon Jones found out that we named our firstborn Roman. He said, quarterbacks? How could you name your son after a quarterback?
I had a real problem with that. And I told Jennifer, I said, you know, if the old man was alive, he'd be awful upset with you because your first kid have to be a defensive player. You understand what I mean?
Deacon! Go, Deaky. You can do it.
I thought that was one of the greatest things that could happen to me. My coach's daughter named one of her kids after me, and she understood what my contributions to her overall life was, and she had enough love and respect for that.
I feel as though he knew that someday somebody would go back and write a book about him. My question is, did he know that that would be me?
George Allen's career-winning percentage remains among the all-time NFL coaching leaders, and he was elected to the Hall of Fame in 2002. He left an indelible mark on those he touched, and his love for the game that was his lifeblood will be felt for generations to come.
I can't imagine anybody like him ever again. He was so uncomplicated. He was just purest sense of a good man. That's why my son's name is George.